Nathan Harris is a typical successful man, smart, determined, and always steadfast in the face of challenges. But when his car suddenly breaks down in the middle of a cold winter night, his composure is tested. Two policemen, Victor and Max, stop, but instead of helping, they mock him. "Do some push-ups. Show how strong you are," Max sneers. With each push-up in the freezing cold, Nathan feels the humiliation rising, but that only fuels his determination to get revenge. And nothing, from that night on, will ever be the same. Stay tuned to discover a story full of drama and unimaginable surprises. Don't forget to follow the channel to stay updated on the next developments. Nathan Harris can't wait. After a long day in the conference room, the negotiations took longer than expected, and now all he wanted to do was go home, crawl into his favorite chair, pour himself a stiff drink, and relax. Instead, his car suddenly stopped in the middle of the road on a cold winter night where there was only darkness and the wind howled through the deserted streets. "What the hell?" Nathan sighed, looking at the dashboard where the engine warning light was on. He felt tense, not because of the car trouble, but because of the cold loneliness around him. The streets were deserted and the houses were silent. He pulled up his jacket and took a deep breath to calm himself. It must be a minor problem. But as he stepped out of the car, a feeling of unease came over him. The wind was strong and the cold air cut into his skin. As he tried to open the hood, he suddenly noticed a light in the distance, gradually getting closer. Someone would help him. But when the patrol car stopped in front of him, he had no idea that this was the beginning of another ordeal. Two policemen got out. One was Sergeant Victor Kane, who had a cold, arrogant appearance and sharp eyes. The other was Max Ford, a young policeman who always appeared impatient, his eyes cold and full of mockery. Victor slowly approached Nathan, the flashlight beam shining directly on his face, causing Nathan to squint. "Looks like you had trouble with your car, right?" Nathan, trying to stay calm, replied, "Yes, the car stopped suddenly, and I'm trying to check what's wrong." Max stood nearby, his mouth sneering. "A broken car in the middle of the night like this? Who do you think will believe your story?" Nathan felt his body tense. From their tone and eyes, he knew this was not a normal meeting to offer help. Both of them seemed to be trying to hurt him. But he just kept quiet, trying to maintain his composure. "Well, I thought you were strong, huh?" Max said with a sneer. "Then show me some exercises. Just do some push-ups. Prove to me that you can handle this cold." Nathan glared at Max, the arrogance in his words making Nathan's anger rise. But he kept his cool. Part of him wanted to fight back immediately, wanted to protest against this insult. But the other part, the rational part, knew that now was not the time to do that. He needed to have some patience. Victor, seeing that Nathan did not react immediately, added, "Don't disappoint us, Harris. You're a man. Can you show us some push-ups?" Nathan just looked at the ground, said nothing, and started doing push-ups. Every time he lowered his body to the ground, the icy surface seeped to his hands. The numbness spread quickly, but Nathan didn't dare complain. Each push-up was a blow to his pride. The cold seeped into his bones, but he knew he couldn't be weak. Max and Victor stood there, eyes full of satisfaction as Nathan suffered. "Go all out, Harris," Max continued to taunt. "If you can't do a push-up, how can you be worthy of our respect?" Nathan didn't reply. Each time he did a push-up, the humiliation grew, but he didn't show weakness. With each push-up, he told himself, "Not now, Nathan. Not now." When Nathan had completed a few dozen push-ups, Victor glanced at his watch, then walked over to him with a satisfied smile. "Not yet, man. This isn't enough." Nathan felt anger burning in his chest, but he didn't dare protest. He just stood up, holding onto his bike to steady himself. "Thanks, guys," he said coldly. "Can you help me fix my car?" Max raised his eyebrows and smirked. "We're not here to help you. We're doing our job." "All right, Nathan sighed, deciding that he couldn't stay here any longer. He got into the car, closed the door, and sat there. The feeling of humiliation still lingered, but a part of him had changed. This night would never pass without consequences. Nathan swore in his heart that even if he could only endure it silently for now, one day these people would pay the price. That night, when Nathan's car finally started up again, all he wanted to do was go home, leave the cold and humiliation behind. But something inside him wouldn't calm down. He felt a simmering anger, like a fire that couldn't be extinguished. Every time he thought about what had happened, every time he imagined Max's mocking gaze and Victor's indifference, his pride burned. Nathan wasn't one to forget easily, and he wasn't one to let himself be wronged without doing anything. He sighed in the leather seat, staring out the window as the car drove through the empty streets. He knew one thing. Even if it took him a lifetime to get his revenge, he would do it. Not just for himself, but for everyone who had been wronged in this way. We can't let this go like it was nothing, Nathan told himself. This day will not be just a memory. I will get justice. Nathan woke up the next morning with a new determination. He knew that his revenge was not an impulsive act. He could not just rush into confronting the people who had wronged him without preparation. What he needed was the power of justice, and justice does not always come in anger. So Nathan began to plan. He wanted not only to avenge himself, but also to change the system that had allowed people like Victor and Max to thrive. He sought out influential people, allies in government who could help him create real change in the profession. As time went on, Nathan continued to build relationships, quietly getting closer to his goal. Every day he found a piece of the story that police officers like Victor and Max had hidden. Every story, every person he met made him realize that change was inevitable. And then one day, when Nathan was notified of an opportunity he couldn't miss, he knew the time had come to face it. Justice never waits forever. He had been prepared long enough. Nathan Harris walked into the conference room with a confident air. All eyes in the room were on him, and no one could have guessed that the man who had just entered was the one they had once despised. His heart was pounding in his chest, but not because of anxiety. It was because of his unwavering belief in the path he had chosen. Today was no accident. In fact, Nathan had planned this change for a long time. After the incident that night, he had decided that he would not just be a helpless victim, but would become a person of power. He used his influence and connections in the political world to influence the sheriff election, where the real power holders had created an environment of corruption and abuse of power. Nathan knew that change would not come with words alone. It would require strength from within, and he was the only one who could do it. After months of working quietly, Nathan had successfully built a strong alliance with the city officials. They recognized his leadership and toughness and knew that Nathan was the only one who could get the police force back on track. With their support, Nathan won the position of police chief, knowing that the fight would not be easy. However, he could not let the likes of Victor and Max continue to run amok. When Nathan first stepped into the police chief's office, he felt a sense of victory, but he also knew that he had just entered a thorny path. The corrupt police officers, who were accustomed to power and abuse, would not let him off easily. Victor Kane and Max Ford, who had tormented Nathan that night, stood in the corner of the room. Although Nathan tried to keep a cool face, he could still see the tension in their eyes. They couldn't believe that the man they had forced to do push-ups in the freezing cold was now standing before them as the chief of police. The other police officers in the room were silent, not daring to utter a word. Although they were used to change, Nathan becoming the chief of police still made them doubtful. Could he really change this corrupt system? Or was he just a fat fish in a big pool full of sharks? Nathan looked towards Victor and Max, his eyes as cold as ice. You guys, he began, his voice low but powerful, are going to face a big change, not just for me, but for the entire police force. Victor took a step forward, trying to maintain a straight face. Change? We've been in this business too long to understand the system. No one can change it. Nathan smiled faintly, unfazed. That's why I'm here, to do what you don't dare to do. The confrontation between them was like a storm sweeping everything away. Nathan continued, This is the time for change. I'll start with you, and I won't stop until every wrongdoing is exposed. He looked at the colleagues around him, then turned to Max. From today on, all your actions will be closely monitored. There will be no more room for corruption, no more room for abuse of power. The atmosphere in the room was heavy. Everyone present could feel the change coming. Whether they wanted it or not, they had to face the truth. Nathan Harris had become the chief of police, and people like Victor and Max would no longer be able to act so easily. Victor and Max tried to maintain an arrogant appearance, but their eyes couldn't hide the worry. Suddenly, Victor said, What do you think you're going to do? Everything has its own rules, Harris. The rules? Nathan chuckled. It's because you've abused the rules that I'm here, to put you back where you belong. Nathan could clearly sense that what he had just said was more than a declaration of war. It was his commitment to himself and to all those who had been hurt by police officers like Victor and Max. The door to change had opened, and Nathan had stepped through that threshold, and there was no turning back. Nathan Harris couldn't stop thinking about what had happened in the past few days. Now that he had become chief of police, he had no time to rest or celebrate. The real battle had just begun. In the weeks since he took office, Nathan devoted himself to investigating and gathering evidence of the wrongdoings of Victor Kane and Max Ford. He knew that power alone could not change the deeply entrenched system of corruption. What he needed was the truth. And the truth, no matter how devastating, would be the most powerful tool to clean up the police force. Nathan didn't just listen to the oppressed. He also tapped into trusted sources within the police force. Some, though fearful, finally decided to speak up when they saw the change Nathan was bringing. The emails, phone records, and confidential documents Nathan collected painted a clear picture. Victor and Max had abused their power for years, using their positions to manipulate decisions and intimidate those under their control. One evening, as Nathan was reviewing the documents he had collected, his phone rang. On the other end was Thomas, a trusted ally in the police force. Something big is going on, Thomas said, his voice strained. I've heard from some people that Victor and Max are trying to cover up what they've done. They're going to do something dangerous. I can feel it. Nathan sighed, but his heart was unshaken. I was prepared for this. We have to make them realize that no one is going to be allowed to abuse their power anymore. The next day, Nathan called an important meeting with the police force and community representatives. The tension in the room was so intense, it could have been cut with a knife. Everyone in attendance knew that this was more than just a meeting. It would decide who would continue and who would face the consequences. Victor and Max sat at the back of the room, their faces stoic, but their eyes were filled with worry. They knew that Nathan had irrefutable evidence in his hands. Nathan stood up, holding a thick file in his hand. As you all know, we have seen the deterioration of this police force over the years. The corruption and abuse of power cannot continue. I have gathered enough evidence of what happened, and now it is time to face the truth. He opened the file and held it up, each page bearing evidence of Victor and Max's wrongdoings, secret phone calls, emails manipulating investigations, and recordings of meetings where they threatened their colleagues. Victor stood up, his face red with anger. This is a fabrication. You can't believe these documents. But Nathan was not afraid. He looked straight at Victor, his voice like steel. I have enough evidence, Victor, and everyone in this room will know the truth. And you, Max, I will not let you get away with this. Max tried to stand up to argue, but Nathan's gaze stopped him. Everyone in the room started to turn to each other, suspicious looks directed at the two men trying to defend themselves. They no longer had the confidence they had before. We cannot continue to tolerate this behavior, Nathan continued. Today, everything will be revealed, and those who abuse their power will pay the price. The atmosphere in the room became heavy. The attendees were silent. No one dared to speak. Everyone was aware that change could not be stopped. The new chief of police had made an irreversible decision. Corruption would have no place in this force. Victor and Max were taken out of the conference room, and for the first time in years, they felt the truth pressing in and unable to escape. They had been exposed, no longer the ones with power in the system. Nathan stood in the middle of the room, his eyes shining with determination. Today is just the beginning. We will rebuild this force, step by step, and we will never allow people like them to return. With this decision, Nathan not only put an end to Victor and Max's abuse of power, but also sent a powerful message to anyone who thought they could take advantage of their position. Justice had begun, and Nathan would not stop until things changed. In the days after the standoff, the city calmed down, but inside Nathan Harris, the storm was just beginning. The work needed to fix the police force was not something that could be solved overnight. Although Victor and Max had been fired, Nathan knew that a true revolution had to come from the inside out, and that justice would not come without strong action. Nathan wanted more than just removing bad actors. He wanted to create a whole new system where fairness, transparency, and loyalty to the community were key. Over the next several weeks, he held meetings with colleagues, community leaders, and legal experts to develop a comprehensive reform agenda. He invited experts in ethics, law, and sociology to work with the officers. The workshops not only strengthened their professional skills, but also helped them rethink their role in upholding justice. Nathan knew that to change a system, you had to change the way the people in that system saw themselves. He wanted them to understand that they were not guardians of their power, but guardians of the people. In a crucial meeting with senior police officials, Nathan spoke in a calm but determined voice. We live in difficult times, but we can do better. I will not leave behind a chief of police with power and no accountability. The days of corruption and unjustified power are over. I promise you all that every decision, every action of this force will be monitored, transparent, and fair. The officers in the room listened, many of them still skeptical about this change. But Nathan was undaunted. He looked at them, unwavering, and knew that once things were set, they would not be able to go back to their old habits. Gradually, individual officers in the force began to sense the changes. They began to understand that Nathan was not a leader who would deceive them or use his power for personal gain. He was leading a restructuring strategy where fairness and service to the community would be the top priorities. The community felt the change as well. Direct meetings with residents, joint patrols with police and community organizations helped create an unprecedented atmosphere of cooperation. Previously, residents had felt alienated and afraid when facing the police. But now they began to trust that the leaders of the force truly wanted to serve them, not just protect their own interests. One day, after a community meeting, a boy of about 10 years old approached Nathan as he was leaving. The boy looked up with shining eyes and said, I want to grow up and be a police officer like you. You're a good guy, right? Nathan sat down, gently stroking the boy's hair, smiling. Being a police officer is more than just wearing a uniform and a badge, son. It's about courage, honesty, and the courage to do the right thing when no one is looking. The boy nodded, his eyes sparkling with hope. This was why Nathan fought, not just for the mistakes of the past, but for future generations. He wanted people like this boy to grow up in a world where the police were allies, not enemies. In the end, the change didn't stop with the police force. It spread throughout the city. The community began to get involved in new initiatives, and police officers became allies with residents, listening and helping them. Although Nathan still faced challenges and opposition, he felt he was on the right track. Under Nathan Harris's leadership, the police force not only regained the trust of the people, but became an example of a true justice system. And while men like Victor and Max still sought to restore power, Nathan knew that justice always prevails in the end.